Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation community. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. We're doing things a little bit different this time. I had such a great conversation with Dr. Kristy Johnson about her Innovation Award that she won from our foundation in 2024, that we're splitting it up into two separate podcasts. So in part one today, we're really going to focus on who Kristy Johnson is and some of the big challenges associated with developing outcome measures and choosing outcome measures in rare diseases like Phelan-McDermid syndrome. This is a really important discussion, especially with the onset of gene therapy trials with Jaguar, as well as any of the new upcoming trials. And so I hope you tune in and get excited. Part two, which will drop in about a week from now, will really focus specifically on her project and what her aims are. Thanks so much. All right. Welcome back, Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation community. I am so excited to have another one of our podcasts coming here to you. This time, it's with our 2024 grant awardee of the Innovation Award. We have Kristy Johnson, an assistant professor from Northeastern University. Her grant, titled ROSCO, a novel virtual natural communication paradigm for individuals with PMS, is what she'll be talking about today. Welcome, Kristy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be able to talk to you and the entire Phelan-McDermid syndrome community.
Great. So first, can you share a little bit about your background and how you found your way into Phelan-McDermid syndrome research?
Yeah, this is actually not a short question or a short answer. I have sort of a winding background, as I think a lot of researchers who, end up in these different communities do, and a lot of parents who are probably listening to this, and community members who are engaged. So I actually started my career in physics. In undergrad, I was a physics major with minors of math and astronomy, so no human research involved at all. I went straight from my undergrad into a PhD program in physics. And my husband, my now husband, was also doing a PhD in physics. And we got married during our degree and then started our family shortly after that. And our son was born with a rare genetic disorder called MEF2C haploinsufficiency syndrome. And when he was born, there were 7 known cases worldwide. And it was very clear to me at that time that that's where I needed to be. And I think a lot of families and parents can probably resonate with this decision. And so I actually paused my degree, not kind of knowing where I would go after that, to be home with my son, whose name is Felix. And I was with him for the first 4 years of his life. And during that time, we ended up moving to Boston for my husband's career here. And slowly, some of the resources opened up where he could go to a specialized preschool, and I had some time to look back and decide where I wanted to go with my life. And I knew I really wanted to do a PhD, but at this point, physics wasn't the love of my life anymore. Felix was, and so I was very lucky to be able to get into MIT to do a PhD there, and a department that is really multidisciplinary, meaning the divisions between like neuroscience and engineering and computer science and things like that are not as strict, and we're allowed to walk across a lot of different disciplines. This is the MIT Media Lab. And it was during there that I really started building new devices and new tools, and started running new studies, including some neuroscience studies with individuals and for individuals with complex neurodevelopmental differences, including a lot of individuals with autism, but really focusing on the group of individuals who have, just complex needs, so genetic disorders, autism, intellectual disabilities, minimal to no speech, and really looking at what we could build out for this community, both scientifically and from technology. And then COVID hit, and a lot of my time in research changed as well. I also had another child during all of this. During that time, I was able to get a postdoc. So once you finish your PhD, you do this couple-year training after that at Boston Children's Hospital in the Translational Neuroscience Center there, which is a big part of what runs the natural history study that Phelan-McDermid syndrome has been a part of. Yeah. And that's really where I met the PMS community for the first time, was working as part of the DSE, the Developmental Synaptopathies Consortium natural history study. And I was able to analyze a lot of the data from that natural history study as part of my postdoc time. And I not only fell in love with the community, but also, just realized how much overlap there was between Phelan-McDermid syndrome and many of the other disorders and groups that I had been working on. And it was just like an incredible place to be. And then I was again very lucky to have the opportunity to serve as a faculty member at Northeastern University, which is in Boston, in 2023. And I have joint appointments in electrical and computer engineering and communication sciences and disorders. So I'm in the College of Engineering and the College of Health Sciences, and I love it. I'm I really like being across all these different disciplines and really looking at the intersection of how we can leverage the strengths of different cultures and scientific backgrounds and engineering to really advance this population of these individuals. So kind of a winding road, but really, really happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, whenever we first met and kind of heard your story, I think it's so far, again, I'm really new here and but have been obviously in the broader neurodevelopmental disorder field for a while. It's definitely one of the more unique ones. But I think, like it obviously, I would imagine Felix has clearly driven and changed your career path. And we are so lucky to have you in the Phelan-McDermid syndrome world. And like you said, I do think sort of that, moment where you needed to make some big life decisions, probably, I'm sure, definitely resonates with our community and even some of the staff at Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation. So we're happy to have you here. But I'd, really love to hear more about how you think your sort of lived experience as a mother of a child of a rare disease has impacted you as a researcher. But then on the flip side, also how your experience as a rare disease researcher has impacted you as a parent of a kid with rare disease.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think the experiences that I've had, they can sound unique in that profile, but they're not. I think they're really the response that a lot of parents, in fact, most parents and caregivers that I've encountered, Felix is now 13, almost 14, over the last 14 years almost, that I've encountered, this is the response where you use whatever tools and resources that you have and that you might have access to support your child. And for me, I was really lucky that, this was very early in my career. This was, Felix was our first child, and I had tools and resources around science. Like I knew how to read papers, I knew how to understand scientific studies, and I was able to leverage that to kind of go down new paths. But I don't think that is an uncommon response. I think that's really what most parents do. And it's so invigorating to see the different ways that other parents respond to the needs of humans in their lives. It's really uplifting and hopeful about how we take care of one another. So I definitely think, obviously, like Felix and being a parent has impacted my career like drastically, importantly, critically. And I think on the flip side, my experience as a researcher has really taught me what we can and can't do in science and in technology, right? There's no silver bullet. There was no like wishful thinking, like if only wishing made it so. Like there are just certain things that are limitations of what we can ask. What scientific questions, what neuroimaging can tell us, right? What genetics can tell us, what the measurements that we use and develop, which we'll probably get into in this conversation, can really provide. And the same thing for things like machine learning and AI and new technology, wearable sensors and AAC technology, things like that, right? There's so much potential in all of these domains, really limitless potential, but there's also like reality, the sort of steps we have to take to get there. And I think that's been, wonderful. Sometimes hard to learn as I go. Like I will start with a wishful thinking and then realize, oh, that's not a question I can ask, right? That's not something we can answer in the way that the way that statistics work, so like the way that we have our tools. And so that's been really helpful to have both those goals and wishes and the things that I hear from the community still, and as a member of these communities. But really, like, how do we translate those wishes into reality, and the steps that it takes, and the slowness and the hardness and everything else involved. So that they go hand in hand, and they continue to inform my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I think you make so many good points there. I mean, first, kind of going back to you use the unique resources you had to help your son. But like you said, every caregiver, parent, grandparent out there is sort of figuring out their own resources. And kind of taking advantage of those. You just happen to have this amazing background in science and apparently are able to switch from physics to communication and engineering. I don't think I could do that. But you also, I think it's also probably helpful to have that perspective of you have this brilliant science idea, but we're not there yet. And we have maybe pieces of the technology or steps along the way to start getting that answer, but there are human limitations, there's limitations to what we can do. And like you said, just the process in general is really slow. Which we will definitely probably be getting into more. So congrats again on receiving the 2024 Innovation Award from PMSF. Could you share a little bit more about what your project aims to accomplish?
Yeah, this project is based around a new type of communication measurement. It's really more of right now, it's that at the protocol or the paradigm stage where we're still multiple steps away from it being a measure. But we call it ROSCO, which stands for Rapid Online Sample of Communication. But mostly we like the word ROSCO. It has a cute little raccoon icon that we use all around. He's a little mascot in our lab. And the idea is, how can we capture the real world communication that individuals who are especially non or minimally speaking, and by that I mean no spoken words to maybe a handful of spoken words or even a few dozen, but really in that domain of not phrase speech for their lifetimes, for most cases in Phelan-McDermid syndrome and in many other neurodevelopmental differences and disorders. How do we capture the ways that they are already communicating? This is very much a strength-based measure. It's looking at like they are richly and expressively communicating is the underlying ground assumption. And our job as researchers and the goal of this protocol is to learn that, right? And to be able to capture it in a really reliable way so that we could use it eventually as a measure in clinical trials or in interventions or in, just kind of daily life. And this was really born out of the need and the desire that we heard from the community and that I saw in the data and many other people were seeing in the data. So, a lot of the natural history data that we have was showing, as I was analyzing it, we were seeing kind of these two different lines in, especially in Phelan-McDermid syndrome, those who were coming in with some speech and language abilities, and they were progressing over time over the course of the natural history study. But the ones that had very few of those spoken words and often, a really different style of communicating, were not able to capture their skills in the tests and assessments that we're using. And this is really frustrating. It's frustrating for the scientists who are coming in trying to show how these individuals are growing and changing over time. It's also demoralizing for the parents. And as a parent of a child who has no spoken words ever in the course of his life at 13, almost 14, I hate these. They're horrible to fill out because we're at the same questions that we were, 8 years ago, and that is not representative of our daily life. Like, right. My child has changed and grown in wonderful and extraordinary ways that are thrilling, but the tools that we're using are not able to see that. I liken this to the idea of like trying to measure the width of my house, but we're using the unit of measurement of a mile. And if you try to measure the width of my house using a unit of measurement of a mile, it's zero, right? We can't measure it using that measuring stick. And I know a lot of the community is probably familiar with inch stones versus milestones. And this is getting at that goal of really figuring out sensitive measurements that is able to capture the change. Like if I got a much bigger house, even that wouldn't be measured if we're just using a mile to measure it. And that's sort of what we're seeing and hearing in this community of, well, my child is going from like no sounds to babbling, right? Or, or like looking at me more, or handing me things, or, we've developed our own ways of expressing, but we're still not able to capture that. So the goal of ROSCO was built around that. But we also recognize that there are many challenges to just getting towards that goal. Like many people have had this goal. And one of them is that the community is spread across the country and the world, right? So they're geographically distributed. And I grew up in the rural Midwest, not anywhere near a university or a large hospital or anything like that. And the access to resources and access to these clinical trials and the people who are doing this research is a major limiting factor for the community. It's hard for us to recruit. It's hard for the community to get in. So we designed the study to be fully remote. So it's done entirely in everyone's homes and in their natural environments. And this has the added benefit of understanding that when these individuals are communicating, they are doing so in a way that is usually really robust, really clear and strong, or like you've developed this system of communication in your home with people that that may not show up quite so well when you go to a clinic or you're talking to a stranger or a new doctor or a new therapist. And we wanted to capture like the best communication that they were doing, the ways that they communicate in their daily life. So this allows us to do this in the home. It also allows us to, like get larger numbers and address and realize the heterogeneity of the population, right? So sometimes there's that selection effect where the ones that are going and taking the trouble to drive to the university or the clinic or wherever the study is run are the ones that are, maybe more affected or have X, Y, and Z. And this allows us to get a little bit more representative picture of the community. So that's what ROSCO does. There's multiple parts to ROSCO. Specifically, the innovation grant will allow us to look at 3 different things. The first is something called retest reliability. So we have spent the last 18 months, and this is like me and my motley crew of team of I'm a young professor, developing ROSCO with the community. So every single time I have run it, we've had an interview afterwards, we talk and we really focus on what went well, what didn't go so well. We ship all the material there. We've developed all these different guidelines, everything from like how to turn on. We send extra smartphones with tripods to get multiple angles, not just like a quick Zoom call. We really get the whole environment. And we make sure like everything from turning on the smartphones to like plugging things in is really clearly spelled out. And then the actual activities that we do during ROSCO was all really developed iteratively, meaning like step by step, really focused back and forth feedback and design changes with the families, many of whom were Phelan-McDermid syndrome families. So thank you to all of the PMS families out there who have participated during our piloting and feasibility. And now we want to know, is our measure like stable, right? So if you, for example, think about a kid who is, say an 8-year-old, my daughter, who like, if we measure her today, and if I measure her in a week or 2, I would expect that measurement to be about the same, right? And that is what we like, then it means the way I'm measuring her is pretty stable. And however, in 6 months, I would expect some change in that measurement, right? So that's what we're doing with this. We do a ROSCO. We call it time point 1. And then 1 to 2 weeks later, we do another ROSCO. And we expect these ROSCOs with the same individuals to be about the same, right? We want our measure to show a stability in these 2 measurements. Then 6 months later, we do the same thing again. We do a ROSCO, and then a week or 2 later, we do another ROSCO. So we want the difference between these 6 months to show us that change. That's that like we're developing a new measuring tool that's sensitive to 6 months of growth in this population, but we want it to be stable so that we know that the thing we're measuring is like real and consistent and objective and all of these other things that are really important for it to go on to be used in clinical trials, but also in intervention. It's also just like as a tool to map the way that communication is developing for this population. So, step 1, test, retest. Step 2, the 6 months change. And step 3 is to really look at how the new ROSCO, which again is built on many things that have existed, but modified in small but important ways to capture the strength of the communication in this population and do it in a robust, reproducible, naturalistic setting. And then so to compare it to established measures. And this is really important for other scientists to be able to say, okay, we have the Vineland, we have these other things that we've looked at for years, decades even. Where does this fit, right? What works, what doesn't? And that's really important for adoption in the broader field to really enhance that impact. So those are the goals of the study, and we're so excited to be kind of making this major progress. This is going to be a critical component of driving the field towards measurements that are sensitive and hopefully meaningful and reliable for this population.
Yeah, I was so excited about when I read your proposal and application, coming from the clinical psychology field and struggling with measures and just the imperfectness that there is out there. There are the vast majority of measures that are used in research studies have been designed on typically developing populations. And even those that do include a small subset of individuals with a neurodevelopmental disorder typically are not ones with, let's say, Phelan-McDermid syndrome, or who are non-speaking or haven't developed spoken language yet, or have more severe intellectual disability. And so, one, you're preaching to the choir. And I imagine for parents out there too, because, one of the beautiful things it sounds like about ROSCO is that it should really be highlighting those sensitive changes that are clinically meaningful to families, going from not having an indication for, let's say, a yes or no, to having some indication. Maybe it's a change in tone, maybe it's a nod, maybe, it's a squeak. That's massively important for families. And by and large, none of our measures out there really be able to do that. And so, I think that's something, as you said, you mentioned how demoralizing some of these measures can be, filling it out. And, I have been in the opposite side, obviously, of the person giving these measures and feeling like, oh, I don't want to ask this question, but I have to. I can't even imagine what you and our other parents feel like in those of like, yeah, the answer is still no, even though there has been nice progress. We just don't have the right measures yet to really be able to figure that out.
Yeah, I think the struggle is very real, and it is definitely going back to the early question of, how am I motivated? How has being a parent motivated the ways that I am a researcher, especially a parent of Felix? And between those times, between physics grad school and MIT grad school, I looked for studies. Now, granted, when Felix was born, there were 7 known cases worldwide of his disorder, and there was just so little known. But I was looking for anything, right? He got an autism diagnosis. He had these other things. Maybe there were other boxes we could fall into. And he didn't qualify for any study anywhere. And then when he did qualify, it was horrible. Like, we weren't able to complete them. He was, very much upset and distressed and things like that, because they were asking him to sit still for long periods of time, or point. Like, they can't point. He couldn't for a very long time, and even now his point is it's a Felix point, right? And so it was really focused on, like, there will not only is there nothing known, there won't be anything known unless we build it ourselves, right? We need better tools. We need more opportunities, and we need better understanding for us to make progress in these fields. And so it's and like, this is, again, not unique. This is a story that I have over and over. I know you have as well. And it's not just a demoralizing, or like, oh, that's such a bummer for you. It's crippling to the entire scientific and like lived experience communities, because we can't get at these measures. So hopefully there are a lot of people out there trying to make these changes. So hopefully together we can do it.
Right. Well, and I think also connecting it back to some other things that are on parents' minds right now, between, the Jaguar gene therapy trial that's getting started, hopefully Neurin soon too, is that without good objective measures within these trials, it's really hard to capture change, even if it is happening. And parents can tell you, or clinicians can tell you, if the measure they chose, or, that the company chose and FDA is all on board for, if there's no change there, the trial can fail, even if there's meaningful change.
And we've seen this, right? We've seen this with other Angelman and other disorders that have gone to multiple phases, phase 2, phase 3 level, and the trial gets shut down because they're not seeing the changes, even though parents are anecdotally reporting changes. They're not the endpoints that they've decided in advance. So it's critically important, right? Financially and scientifically, again, all of these things depend upon one another. One of the things that I heard from feedback as we've been developing ROSCO was that if a clinical trial couldn't get someone off the floor of, say, the Vineland, which I think we're all very familiar with, then, well, it's not making enough of a difference. And I just want to call that out because I think that's a really important and reasonable a comment and assumption to make, that if you're looking for a change and if you're at the floor, if it can't bump you off the floor, it's not enough of a change. But I just want to call out some of the timelines that clinical trials and some of these studies look at. So maybe yes, I agree with you. Totally reasonable to want to see this change that gets captured with the assessments and tools that we have right now. But maybe that change is at the year level or maybe 18 months, right? Maybe you're seeing progress towards that change, but the clinical trial is looking for a change at 3 months or 6 months, right? It's pretty rare that they're able just logistically to continue these things for long enough. And what we don't want to do is miss it, right? If you're making progress towards those what maybe measurable changes or things that we know are established, we don't want us to lose the momentum or stop where we are simply because you're not there yet. And so one of the things that's really important in the ways that we're designing these tools, ROSCO is not at the measurement level. This requires many steps of validity checking and testing, which is one of the things that this grant is enabling. But as we go towards that, we're looking for what is the smallest change that we're able to recognize on what time scale, and that time scale is really important. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's kind of one of those things that I learned on what science can and can't do. We would want these major changes that are measurable with the tools that we have, with the milestones and the sticks that we're using. But, maybe we're working in that direction and maybe it changes based on age and we don't want to miss it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly am with you on that call out, is that, and, I understand from the scientific and financial point why certain trials are 6 weeks or 3 months or whatever it is. But at the same time, that's also making large assumptions about what progress and change can happen within a neurodevelopmental disorder that we still don't know much about. And so, I've definitely seen this in my prior work in the Fragile X field, where it's again, that progress was clearly being made. The trial was cut short, and now that progress is lost. And who knows if it continued on, what it would have looked like. So we're going to pause here today. I know it kind of ends a little bit abruptly, and you might be thinking about, what is ROSCO? I want to know more about it, and how do I get involved? But we, again, had such a good conversation about all of these challenges associated with outcome measures in Phelan-McDermid syndrome that I thought it was really important that we don't cut that material and split this episode into 2 parts. So we'll end this, and then in about a week or so, we will release the next part where you get to hear a little bit more about the specifics of the ROSCO project from Dr. Kristy Johnson. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we can't wait for you to tune in next week.